this goes back to the Chomsky debate. It
Right.
seemed to me, especially with my lens as a Black American, I gotta say, that there are all of these arguments that are constantly marshaled to explain why the lesser of the two evils is not, in fact, sufficiently evil not to vote for them. And that we have a process of grandfathering in existing harms that aren't so visible, harms that are more systemic, harms that we've learned to live with for decades or centuries.
Yeah. I take it where you're going is, if this is a red line, why did you have previous, why aren't other things, right? Why isn't all of it? Is this just a more visceral and visible thing?
Yeah, because this one's on TikTok.
Right. But I don't even think I have like what I would call like red lines in the abstract. What I really think is that, like, for example, if Trump said, like, as soon as I get into office, there's going to be, like, there really will be no more Gaza. We're going to hand Israel a nuclear bomb. We're going to encourage them to drop it on Gaza.
Well, they've already got one, but yeah.
Well, yeah, right. They've already got. But if they said, like, we are going to encourage the obliteration, the elimination of every last Palestinian. Now, as much as I think Biden's rhetoric on Palestine is completely hypocritical, it's a bunch of lies, it's a bunch of PR. I think there could be a meaningful difference where Joe Biden is enabling to protecting the Israeli policy, and Trump would make it way, way, way worse. Could happen. I don't know that that is the situation we're in. If that was the situation we're in, I think we would have to have a conversation about, like, do we have to keep this much, much, much worse, obvious madman out of power?
Well, let's have that conversation, because Nathan, there's a world where I'm just mooting this. Okay. We're two failed lawyers having an argument.
Oh God. Why do we always come back to that? How does it always fall back to Joe Biden? I really can't stand that guy. He occupies too much space in my brain.
It's 2024, my guy. But look, here's the thing. A world where Donald Trump is publicly announcing, oh yeah, we're fully going to do a genocide. We're going to drop a nuke on Gaza. Is there an argument that that's a world where the international community is compelled to stand against the United States of America and protect Gaza and actually indict Israel and the United States in international courts, the ICJ, what have you, to throw up a sanctions regime against the United States, all of those kinds of things, because him announcing so publicly his intent rips down the veil that is currently giving kind of plausible deniability to the Western project here.
Sure, that's a possible thing that could happen too. But then we're back in a debate over which is the least worst of the possible paths that we realistically are going to go down in the next few years. Right? We're having a lesser of two evils debate.
You raise that hypothetical as a way to get to this question of, well, when it might be justified to do the lesser of two evils. And what I guess I'm saying is, even under those circumstances, the answer is not clear. It is not the gravity of the evil can become increasingly clear without the kind of expectation of how bad, what kind of outcomes or responses to that evil down the line will be better or worse, becoming actually more clarified. You know what I'm saying?
Well, are you suggesting that our knowledge of the future is essentially always so uncertain in politics that we can't really make our judgments on the basis of what we expect to happen if one person gets elected over the other?
I think I might be saying that. I think I might be saying that one's morality, if you base it on your ability to predict the future, you're going to end up making immoral choices, because we're not very good at prognosticating. And all you can do is do the most moral thing in the moment based on your values, as opposed to what you think is going to happen.
Well, we have to do some things on the basis of what we think is going to happen. I mean, everyone we vote for, we're choosing on the basis of what we're picking the person we think will actually carry out the thing we want more, right? You have to make kind of predictions in the world about in order to judge your actions.
But predictions based on, I don't know. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's not about the role that prediction is playing, but rather that people are basing their predictions on kind of the stated positions of politicians, as opposed to looking at the broader political outcomes
I do think you evaluate Democrats and Republicans on the basis of what they do and not what they. So you don't go like, oh, Biden says he cares about Palestinians. Trump doesn't say he cares about Palestinians. Although interestingly, Trump has been weirdly quiet on Gaza and Israel. He is staying away from this issue, not going near it because he knows it's terrible for Joe Biden. But you don't go, well, the Biden administration says they're committed to getting humanitarian aid in. You go, okay, well, my understanding of the Biden administration is they have some things where there is a limit to what they will accept from Israel. There are some limits. That might be different from there being no limits. Yeah, I think we do know that Israel has had to change course and you might say, well, it's so marginal, it doesn't really matter considering the number of people being wiped out. But I think Israel might have been worse. They wanted to be worse. They have been slightly constrained over what they would like to do.
I mean, like realistically, though, so this is the narrative, and I think Adam Johnson's been doing a really good job of pointing this out among some others. That we've had a whole week, maybe, of a media cycle that is putting out that Joe Biden is very frustrated. His administration is very frustrated with Benjamin Netanyahu. They're really trying to pressure them, but Netanyahu just won't listen, and they're working behind the scenes to do a diplomacy. Yeah. And at no point in these articles is there ever the question raised of, well, then why don't we just stop sending them money and aid? Like, we have blockades and sanctions on half the world.
Yeah, stop giving them the bombs if you don't want them to drop them.
Right. And we have American politicians going there. Mike Pence, they're signing bombs, before they're dropped. I mean, the idea that America can't do anything more to stop them is a fiction. We're vetoing UN resolutions for a ceasefire. I mean, so what are the limits? I mean, is this just are we not just participating in the pantomime of the idea that there are limits?
But remember where I started out by saying at this point, the Biden administration's policy really is so extreme that I don't think that it's very obvious that there would be meaningful differences. I like, if I'm making if I think when I'm going into the voting booth, okay, I need to make a consequentialist calculation. What do I think I can bump towards the least worst outcome? The Biden administration is now so extreme that I really think it's totally up in the air. I don't think you can make that decision very well. Of course, we've left aside all the Trump domestic authoritarianism stuff, which is but certainly on Israel-Palestine, I don't know that you could make a lesser evil. You can't even make a lesser evil argument because I think the policies are going to be essentially the same.
Let's go to the domestic stuff then, because here's the argument. The argument that there's not that much difference there is that, okay, Trump did a January 6th. He conspired for 2 or 3 weeks before the election to try to submit a fake slate of electors to undermine the democratic will of people in 7 states across the United States so that he could win. He is saying that he's going to be a dictator on day one, all of the things that the mainstream news is chattering about these days. On the other hand, Joe Biden and his surrogates have declared repeatedly that there will be no primary. They rearranged the order of the primary states. They've kicked competitor candidates off the ballot in Florida and I think some other states. They will not have any debates.
Right. Yeah, some democracy, right? This is the democracy you're trying to protect. Is the one where you win the election before it starts.
Right, and that seems to me to be it's an escalation from trends that we've seen in earlier years and the way that they align themselves against Bernie Sanders. The DNC said that they didn't have an obligation to hold a fair primary process. Down in Brazil, linking debate questions to Hillary Clinton. I mean, so if I'm not trying to say it's the same thing as doing an insurrection, but are these just qualified differences? Are we saving democracy by voting for the Democrats?
When you look at the Republican Party agenda, it is genuinely horrifying, right? I mean, it really is like, it's not just like we're going to pass weak climate legislation. It's like we're going to criminalize considering the climate consequences of an investment. Like that's the difference. And it's like
I don't know that I've heard about that one. Can you unpack that a little?
Oh, I think we just covered this in the current affairs news briefing. There was there's this thing about abolishing ESG. They hate ESG, so they wanted to criminalize. This is a state level thing, but every insane Republican state level proposal eventually becomes the national consensus. But if a state considers environmental and social if they consider ESG in investments of state money, that's they want to criminalize that.
That's like insane.
No, if you look at the Republican Party platforms in various across states, the national, it's the plan to create an authoritarian theocracy. They're total lunatics. They've gone really, really extreme. So
okay, but devil's advocate, devil's advocate, Nathan. I'm just mooting it. Okay, I'm just mooting it. Yeah. Devil's advocate says, look at some place like Georgia. Republican governor, Democratic senators, Democratic leadership at the Atlanta city level.
Yeah,
and you have Cop City. We just passed the 1-year anniversary of the murder of the climate activist, Cop City climate activist. We have, I think I saw some crazy number recently about what the level of investment was in building this cop training facility built based on IDF training. You know, it was like $100 billion. It was a crazy number. And they are passing laws to criminalize protests. They have done like a RICO indictment of the people who are raising money for bail funds for the people arrested there, infringing on free speech rights.
I'm the wrong guest here. You need to have Matt Iglesias. You need to have Noah Smith. You need to have Will Stansel. You know, I always feel like I've maneuvered by you to be the one defending the Democrats. I spend all my time. I loathe these people. And I believe I said at the outset that Biden is awful and that I'm not going to be trying to persuade you.
But I know, but Nathan, what's interesting to me about talking about this with you is because it seems to me, maybe I'm wrong, it seems to me that even you're being really vocal about this red line that Gaza presents. But I think you represent kind of where a lot more of the left is as to, with respect to having more of a trajectory from being maybe unsure about what that meant in 2016, maybe a bit more sure in 2020. And now we're here with Gaza where it's like, well, it's smacking you in the face. Of course, I'm not voting for Democrats. But I'm interested in you because I guess I'm not just trying to do a victory lap here, but it does seem to me that I'm feeling very validated in some of my earlier, more controversial positions. Love to
validate you. You know, you're always right.
No, that's all I'm saying. I'm saying that like
wise. You were very wise, Brianna.
People, you know this. People who told me I was a horrific accelerationist rat bastard back in 2016 when I was anonymous.
Did I tell you were a horrific acceleration? No, I think the difference between us was pretty marginal. I'm like, oh, look, okay. I don't think the vote is I don't think the presidency has that meaningful of a difference, but I think on balance, it is marginally better. And now I'm like, I don't even know if it's marginally better.
But that's my trajectory. But that's a huge difference, Nathan. At the end of the day, you might have, let's say, sided with Chomsky in 2020. I mean, did you? Yeah. So that's meaningful because Chomsky's opinion there was influential to many people on the left and frankly used by many people who are, I think, less lefty, let's say like left-leaning liberals like Mehdi Hasan, held up Chomsky as they do every 4 years to say, I hate this guy every other day of the year, but now you got to vote for Biden because he said so.
But here's the thing, and I never thought this was always a big, like, I think a point where you and Professor Chomsky never found the point where you actually kind of agree, which is that, and it's why the liberals are misusing Chomsky, which is that one of the things he says, and I don't know if he said it to you, but he says usually when he talks about it, he's like, elections are mostly just meaningless spectacle. He's like, it's 1 day a year, you pull a lever, it makes a marginal difference. We're talking about small differences, and it's just because small differences end up meaning a lot of human lives, like the difference between 1% and 2%, that I think that you should but he's like, it's 1 day a year, you should be out organizing, you shouldn't even really debate or discuss this question very much, because like your vote in a presidential election is just such a meaningless way to change the world given what the two parties are.
But Nathan, isn't that a kind of a contradictory opinion? It's meaningless. It's meaningless, but you absolutely have to stand in line and vote for Joe Biden. Because that's what he kept saying to me. All he said was that one phrase like 20 times in a row over the course of this hour-long conversation. Sure, it's meaningless. And what you really should be focused on is organizing outside of electoral politics, which, by the way, is a straw man. Nobody's arguing that those things are mutually exclusive. But you absolutely have to vote for Joe Biden, because even though that is meaningless, it has all these downstream effects that are going to be on your head if you don't.
Totally meaningless. It's like it makes a small difference, but the small difference is also a large difference. And that's not a contradiction.
Nathan.
That's just two different ways of looking at the same thing.
Nathan.
Right? It's like, no, wait a second. Something can be a small difference in one respect and a large difference in another respect. Right? Like, so 100 lives, is that a small difference? Is that a large difference? Well, in one way, it's a very large difference because that's 100 people's lives. In another way, if you're saying the difference between, let's say Trump by candidate A and candidate B is 100 lives out of millions and millions and millions of people, you're like, well, that's an extremely marginal difference. Both of them are killing a lot of people. So it's a small difference. It's also a large difference.
But Nathan, come on, you don't think that's not what Chomsky's saying. What Chomsky wants to do, and I don't mean to make this all about Chomsky, but what people are saying when they do that, what it feels to me is like a kind of a manipulation to say, only, they want to call it small because they say, well, you shouldn't care as much about the moral consequences and the real world big consequences of your vote, the systemic consequences of vote blue no matter who, because they want you, for the purposes of getting you to the lever, to think of your decision as ultimately inconsequential. They want to bully you into doing it by saying, it's not that big a deal, suck it up. At the same time, they want to morally bully you into pulling the lever for the person they want you to pull the lever for by saying the worst possible imaginable outcome is going to be on you if you don't do it. And they vacillate between these arguments to manipulate you into not turning it around and presenting the alternative, which is, if it's such a small difference, if electoral politics is so meaningful, if you think all of these things outside of the electoral realm are so much more significant, then fine, I'm invested in those things. And part of my movement politics is no longer buying into the system, which makes the public feel as though they do have a choice. I think there's a lot of power in doing what you say. If you think electoral politics are so insignificant, if you think that they're so backward and corrupt, then join with me in my project in exposing that for the broader public by divesting from that project altogether, or by registering my discontent with these two options by voting for a third party.
But I register my discontent all the time. I do nothing but write about how horrible the Democratic Party is. Most of my articles now are, in fact, we've lost subscribers because people say, why are you so harsh on poor Joe Biden? All you do is beat up on Joe Biden. Why don't you go after Trump? And so I really don't spend much of my time thinking about how I'm going to vote. First off, my vote in the presidential election is meaningless because I live in Louisiana. It's going Trump. I am voting for Cornel West. So it is literally meaningless for me. If it was true, if we agree that, however, that the difference between Trump and Biden is, this is hypothetically, if it's the difference between a sad remnant of a democracy and an actual dictatorship, well, again, looked at from one perspective, that's like a very small difference. Looked at from another perspective, it's a very large difference. And maybe if you're at a swing state, you should try and push it towards, I don't know, the sad remnants of whatever democracy we have. But I'm not going to spend that much time arguing about it.
Well, I don't know, Nathan. I also feel like that's a little bit of a, I adore you, but I think that's a little bit of a cop-out, to say, well, me personally, I'm not going to think about it that much. Me personally, I think about all these other things. I'm engaged in all these other movement activities. I live in a state where it doesn't really matter. People are, when I look at someone like RFK Jr., the way he's running his independent campaign, which I obviously have substantive disagreements with, is to say, we're framing this as we are going to win. We have 20% or whatever it is, a national polling. And even if we don't win, we're really showing how much public discontent there is out there for the two-party system, and who knows what's going to happen when the next independent candidate runs. I'm going to actually run and compete in places that have historically not gone for a, Cornel West is obviously left, and who knows how you want to characterize RFK Jr., but, he was an environmental lawyer his whole life. I mean, let's call him in many respects liberal. He was running as a Democrat 2 seconds ago. And he's competing in areas and in environments, political environments, that have not historically been sympathetic to that side of the aisle. And so I find it to be frustrating. And I think almost, bending the knee to electoral politics and not thinking broader in terms of movement politics when people who support Cornel West or Jill Stein or whomever minimize the potential effect of growing a political movement that weaponizes, exploits, and uses the electoral political system to foment more movement energy in the same way that the Bernie campaign, I would argue, helped people change their political identifications and raise the bar for what they expect out of politics.
Yeah, we agree with that because we're both pro Bernie campaign. We Current Affairs ran an article on why the left should get behind Cornel West.
Why not Jill Stein? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I didn't really. I don't know. Cornel West seems
ballot
to me
access issues, right?
I mean,
do you know he's going to be on the ballot in Louisiana?
I don't even know he's going to be on the. I don't even know if I could write him in. I have never seen much to impress me about Jill Stein's ability to inspire and organize. Cornel West I find to be a really, really compelling figure who I could see. Unfortunately, he doesn't seem to be a great organizer.
Well, that's the thing. So Jill Stein
if you have the right campaign.
Well, that's it. Jill Stein gets demerits for not being a compelling whatever. I would put to people, I actually disagree with that. I find her to be compelling whenever I hear her speak. She doesn't get many opportunities to do so. She is knowledgeable and specific in ways that I think really help the left, where sometimes we engage too much in a sort of not magical thinking, but magical rhetoric. I think that when I've seen her, I saw her in a Massachusetts debate with, was she running for governor? I forget what she was running for, but she was debating Mitt Romney and a bunch of others on a stage in this vintage clip. And she was so specific and knowledgeable, compelling when she was arguing, I think, about healthcare that I'm sorry, this shouldn't matter, but it does in our political world. She's professionalized in a way that people have respect for, as someone who is a doctor, who went to Harvard and all of these kinds of things that people like. And, as much as she's framed as a kook, she doesn't come off as a kook at all in presentation.
That's a real sexist thing because Marianne gets that too.
Yeah.
The kook
and Cornel, thing. I love Cornel West, but he's definitely out here. He's saying presenting himself as a much more of a character, shall we say, than Jill Stein or Marianne Williamson do.
There's an interesting kind of paradox where or there's this thing where it both has to be true that in order for something to succeed, people have to take a leap of faith and get behind it, and also that they need proof that it could succeed in order to get behind it, right? So Marianne Williamson, I wrote a thing about Marianne Williamson's campaign, very positive. Take Marianne Williamson seriously, give her a chance, treat her as a serious contender in the primary. She's got the best of the policies in the Democratic primary, so get behind her. Why not? I mean, it's the primary. Whatever arguments we have about the general election, the primary, we should all be able to agree that we need to topple it. There's no downside. Get behind Marianne Williamson in the primary. On the other hand, her candidacy has not taken off. Now we can say, there are all these obstacles to it. There are all these ways in which she's treated unfairly. But that raises the question, is the Marianne Williamson candidacy something that the left should put its energy into? On the one hand, you have to just take the leap of faith and do it if you want it to be true. On the other hand, if it's, I'm not sure whether the Marianne Williamson campaign is a valuable attempt to, what do you do? Do you join it? Do you not join it?
Well, look, I think it was a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think that one, she was hurt by the Bernie campaign. I don't think you can overstate how much Bernie's betrayal, after raising so much money from working class people, hurt every left-leaning candidate down the line for a generation. Nobody wants to give anybody money anymore. And so then Marianne Williamson is suddenly not funded outside of anything other than her own money. She obviously is much more affluent than the average American, but she's not she's not Vivek Ramaswamy or Dean Phillips, almost billionaire levels of wealth where you can completely self-fund your own campaign. She's successful author level of wealth where, you can't, if you spend $5 million on your own campaign, you don't have any money left. So, and I'm not saying people should give to her, especially because the second thing I will say is that she happened to the energy right now, even before October 7th, has been around the Israel-Palestine issue. That's largely what kneecapped RFK Jr. with the left as well. And she just happened to be on the wrong side of that issue. Not completely on the wrong side. I do think, yeah.
She seem very read up on it. Also, like the things she said indicated that maybe she kind of new to the historical background on this.
That's tricky. As someone who has had many, many, many private debates with her on this issue, I wouldn't say that she's not informed, but I think that I disagree. I have a difference of opinion on kind of who she listens to, maybe. And I think she's very committed and knowledgeable. Sorry?
Send her Norman's Gaza book.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's the thing. She would say, well, I don't disagree with you on 99% of things. I completely agree with the occupation and that it's wrong and that it hasn't. But I think the fundamental issue is that she, unlike many people on the left, believes in the legitimacy of the founding of a Jewish state in Palestine, in where it is. And is very supportive of a two-state solution, and any solution does not undermine the integrity of there being a Jewish state. And when I many feelings of the people on the left is like, one, the two-state solution is largely uncredible at this point because of the settlement expansion. But also, do we want to endorse an ethno-state in principle? Hey, YouTube, thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.